But like, I figure, it might be fun to just like shoot the shit for like an hour, see where it takes us, post it on YouTube. Maybe some people will be interested. I don't know. Maybe not. Who cares? Um, Either if even nobody's interested, I think it'll just be interesting to look back at like 15 years from now and be like, what the hell were we thinking? Were we full retards? Or like, yo, we saw everything coming. That was awesome. Or like, a mix of the two. But I think people might somehow be interested, maybe, or maybe not, but what we think, because like our backgrounds are a little bit like weird compared to most people. Um, right. And like
Yeah.
we're very kind of like international-ish, I guess. Um,
Are you in Matt? Are you in a place where you hide the dead bodies?
Yes. There's actually a crawl space right over there where there was a dead mouse at some point, or a few dead ones.
a dead mouse. Yeah, technically a dead body, I guess. Yes.
Yeah, it looks like that.
Yeah. So maybe Jean-Luc, you go first, and you say like, yo, who the hell are you? Where are you? And then like, tell me in like 3 minutes your life story.
Yeah.
Oh, because we got to give the intro, but like you can't have the shit go on forever and be like 20 minutes in, Jean-Luc's still talking shit about it, like how grown up, like we'll get there.
Yeah. Okay. So we moved. Born in France, we moved to the States when I was 10, and I am the brothers of these two guys, Matthew and Mark, that are on the call with us, and we I moved over to New York to kind of make a name for myself and for career and whatnot. And then COVID was under lockdown, and Governor Cuomo, the New York governor at the time, said that he was going to ban all travel, basically close down the airport, all international travel first, but then eventually all state travel. And so as soon as he said that he was going to ban all international travel, within 6 hours, I bought flights to leave to Mexico. Um, and I was like, okay, I am not getting locked down in here. And then I moved to Mexico, and I put my old apartment up on Airbnb in New York, and then I've been kind of living in Latin America for the past 4 years, or 3.5. And that's where I met my wife, and we got married. We had a baby. I also hired my Latin American team, and now we have a pretty decent sized staff of like total of 9 people, but only really 6 full time. And
This is like a web design company called Jean-Luc Design, right? Or is it just Jean-Luc now?
yeah, just Jean-Luc. Yep, Jean-Luc.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not cool. So like New York, they were gonna lock down the airports and shit, but like, was New York City itself locked down? Like I hear different things, different people. Like, were you allowed to go to like restaurants and like bars, normal stores, like coffee shops, and just hang out, or like what was that like before you left?
Well, the rules were a little bit backwards. The New York was trying to solve the problem of COVID spreading, and they believed that spreading was inside. And so because they believed that it was inside, they ended up building restaurants outside that were closed containers. So they made the inside outside so that you would have to eat basically in the street. So they made these little sheds. They would have like rows and rows of sheds that are still available today. There's actually a bunch of people who are trying to take them down. But a lot of the rules also didn't make sense. For example, if you go to the park, you had to social distance yourself and wear a mask, and if not, you could have like a $15,000 fine.
Yeah, there were rules like that here too. Like, a lot of restaurants around here, like you were only allowed to have like so many like people, like because all the tables had to be more than 6 feet apart. So like a lot of the restaurants had like outdoor areas, but then they ended up covering them with plastic, which essentially made the outdoor just like indoor, and it just made the whole thing like pointless. Oh, we're going down a tangent, and like not everybody's introduced yet, so maybe I don't know, Matt,
Yep.
you want to go first?
Sure, I will go second. But well, yeah. So I was also born in France, but within those first 4 years, we moved around all over the place, and then kind of honestly remember my life kind of starting in France as a confused kid who didn't speak the language too well and all that. Then we ended up moving back to the States, and I went to community college here, and then Bucknell, went for psychology and education, graduated, and started, I did a bunch of jobs, but then eventually landed on starting working in mental health, supporting individuals, and then that transferred to developmental disabilities, and then back to mental health, a couple different companies. Met my wife through work. We got married. What was that? That's like 6 years ago, almost, something like that. And have 2 kids now. And I mean, if we're, clocking back to COVID, I remember, finding out I'd been exposed and like sleeping in a room in the group home because I didn't want to expose my wife who was pregnant. Then I remember her having it or me having it on my birthday and us quarantining from each other, which was kind of crazy. And then even at the birth of my son, we were basically locked in a room for like 3-4 days with that whole process. So that was kind of nuts. And that whole experience also with losing a lot of our staff during COVID. I just was working coverage nonstop in some of the group homes. So it just honestly was kind of scary in terms of it turning into a different world. So I'm glad we're at the point where we are now. So yeah, I'm obviously related to the both of you.
Yeah, so you're both born in France. I was born in Senegal, Africa. I guess in theory I'm African American, but I'm not heritage in any sort of way. But sometimes it's funny to say that to people. I did put it on some of my college applications at one point, but I don't know that it. Yeah, I think I applied at Penn State, which is the only school I actually applied to, and I put in African American on my college application. I did get a scholarship, but I don't know if it was related to that or not. So who knows? But yeah, so it was
nice.
born there, when I was like 2 years old, and we moved back to the U.S. for like a couple months, and then Holland and France. So from like 2.5 to 12 or something, I lived in France, and then came back here, went to high school here, and then went to college in Holland, Netherlands. Studied international relations and management for Webster, and then been working since in like B2B kind of credit stuff, software, and nothing to do with what I went to school with, but turns out I'm good at computers, apparently. I didn't know that when I first started. Yeah, I was always a little bit involved in like political stuff in high school because I just found it fascinating. But like my political views have definitely changed and evolved. Originally, I was like very much like pro George W. Bush, pro like conservative, and like I gotta be careful what I say because I don't want this to like get taken down if we do post it somewhere. But like now I view him as like an absolute like despicable human being, warmonger that should be tried for treason, and we know the penalty for that, but I won't say it, of course, because then this would get taken down. But I think my views now, even then, I think like I was more of just like a fiscal conservative, but socially, like I don't really care, and I think that's my view right now. Is I'm actually probably more liberal than most liberal people. Registered libertarian for the last like 8 years, 10 years, I don't know, something like that. Didn't vote for Trump for the last 2 elections, but I did this time, so we could get there at some point. But yeah, I consider myself a libertarian. I think people should be able to, what's the typical saying? I think a gay guy should be able to smoke a joint, shoot guns, all at the same time. And if a police comes on his property without a warrant and he tells him to leave, he should have the right to shoot the police. In getting them off his property. So that's how I feel about like most things. The government should stay the hell out of like everybody's decision. Just about everyone. I believe taxes should be next to nothing, if not nothing. I believe the government should do nothing. Literally, just stay the hell out of people's way.
So basically,
Pay
take
for
care
defense.
and roads.
I'm borderline like anarchist now in some ways, but like, I mean, I'm not, obviously I believe like there's a need for some sort of government, but like, why does the government have to make like any decisions at all for people? None. I just don't see it. But yeah, that's my like kind of my philosophy. I mean, obviously there's like edges in there where like I might deviate, you know. Is that I think I'm obviously a capitalist, but I also believe that like true capitalism gone and like pure capitalism gone unchecked leads to monopolies in every single industry, which eventually leads to an oligarchy state. And so like, even though I'm very much like a pro-capitalist person, I think there needs to be checks and balances there also, in order to keep the freedom. Because once you have like monopolies like Amazon, how big it is now, if it keeps growing the way it's going to be just absolutely too much power, and it's just really scary.
Right. John Lake, where do you stand in terms of your political views? Has that changed over time?
Yeah, well, I agree with like the whole laissez-faire government model for the most part. But yeah, monopolies get out of hand. I do think we live in a world where there are monopolies. I think for the most part, right, Google has a monopoly on search. Facebook has a monopoly on social. Tesla has a monopoly on electric vehicles. Potentially, I mean, who knows what else? And I think sometimes what's space? Not SpaceX. The Starlink. I mean, he also has there's no real competitor of Starlink, of like space, satellite, internet. It's just Starlink. There's nothing else. So it's a tough decision about where the constraints and all of those things are.
Well,
but
so like for a new industry, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm gonna cut you off anyway. Whatever. For a new industry, I think it's normal for like Amazon. They start off and they're like brand new. They are pretty much a monopoly in the space, right? But then they take off and like competitors start popping up and stuff like that. I mean, you saw with Facebook, like the first like besides like MySpace, Facebook was like the biggest like social media company like by far. But then all these like little competitors started popping up. But where I think it all ends up going wrong is these Facebook like companies, they end up purchasing their competitors. Like they purchase Instagram, right? And they'll purchase Snapchat, and they'll purchase WhatsApp. Like anytime there's like a competitor that's like taken off in some sort of way, they purchase it. And like that, I think is where like it needs to be enforced to some point. Is like you can't just buy your competition when you already have like over 50% of the market. Like that just doesn't seem right to me. Right? Like capitalism thrives because of like competition. If you already have over 50% of the market, a competitor pops up, starts taking market share. Compete, don't buy. I think that's where maybe the government should have a hand at some point. Like this is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, especially if it starts stifling innovation, or there's like market manipulation, or potentially like the consumer has no other choice. Yeah, to go somewhere else.
Yeah, it's kind of, are you supporting innovation, or are you actually closing it down by limiting
taking
businesses
out.
or acquiring them?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big difference. I think like Blackboard, for example, the learning management system for most colleges, they had a pretty big strategy where they were mostly stifling down innovation. They had tons of patents of things they weren't using, and anytime you try to create competition, you would basically overreach into their territory, and they would bring you to court. Um, so I think that's definitely when things can go bad. But anyway, to the political question, I think that the world splits. For example, the sticky topics are abortion, right? The economy, and you could talk about the border and war. So starting off with abortion, I think that the world splits things on pro-life and pro-choice, and it's in a way of how they slice the pie. And I don't think it's fair to slice the pie that way, because I don't think it really works that way. I think when you're saying pro-choice or pro-life, you're not discussing about, okay, when is life? When does
Yeah.
life begin? If life ends when your heart stops, then life should begin when your heart starts, and then that's when life should begin. And I think there should be some sort of conversation about that. There's a big difference, in my opinion, between taking a morning after pill, or even having a abortion pill within the first month, then waiting 9 months, or even post birth, and then having an abortion. There's you know there's a difference between when there is life and when there's no life. And I think that the words are oversimplified, and there's no like real intellectual conversation about, okay, well,
Uh,
what should
I,
be the precautions and those type of things.
I
Yeah, well,
completely agree. I feel like they don't even want to actually solve the solution. Like, the Obama was running in like 2008 or whatever, and like he promised, like as soon as he gets into office, he's gonna pass a law in Congress to like legislate like abortion rights. And then lo and behold, like he gets elected and he's control of like everything. I think if I remember correctly, and maybe I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, like he got the Senate, he got the House, and he won. He could have passed a law, but like he didn't, right? And I don't think they actually want to like pass any sort of law and legislate it on the federal level, because then it's people stop fighting over it. Um, like I think anybody agrees. I don't want to say anybody, but there's obviously fringe people. I'd say over 80% of like people would agree that like you know, an abortion within like the first week of getting pregnant, whatever, that's not killing a child, right? Most people would agree with that. Now, some people won't, but then everybody, 90+% would also agree that like, within 9 months, that's bad too, right? Like, kids are born now, like 6, 7 months, like pregnant, and like they survive and actually fine. But like,
right.
they just act like, oh, you're
And
either pro or against. And like, that's just not how people feel about it in any sort of way. Like, I think 90% of the people I talk to anyway, like they think, well, people should be able to have an abortion. And like, well, up to what time? Usually the answer I get, even from like liberal people, is something like, 25 weeks, 30 weeks, 20 weeks, somewhere around there, 16 weeks, or if the life of the mother is threatened. And like, can't we just have that type of like reasonable conversation and be like, where do you actually think it should stop? Right? I don't know enough to be able to like stay firmly, well, it should be 15 weeks or 14 weeks. Like, I think that's something that should be like debated by doctors as to like when that officially starts. I don't know when, but to just say like, well, if you believe, to say you're pro-life, therefore like you're completely against like everything. It's just stupid. And I think Americans are smarter than that, and I think they saw right through this whole like Kamala campaign of like they're gonna take away our freedoms. Like Kamala can't do anything about it anymore because Roe v. Wade passed. She could have, that she was part of the presidency. They could have passed a law, but they didn't, right? But like Roe v. Wade passed, and now it's up to the states. She was campaigning in Michigan saying they're going to take away your abortion rights. That's not possible in Michigan because Michigan passed a constitutional amendment 2 years ago in the state constitution protecting abortion rights. The federal government can't even do shit about that. It's in the constitution of the state of Michigan. So, but she's campaigning, completely gaslighting people about this shit. Just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I just
Well,
ranted there.
I mean, from my experience from talking to women, like I have never met a woman who talks about like just openly about having an abortion who doesn't end up breaking up in tears and has huge regrets. And I've known probably over 10 different girls who've gotten abortions and they all regret them. It's never something that somebody's really happy about. I think there's such a huge emotional connection, and I think those things shouldn't be overlooked.
Right, and that's not even part of the conversation most of the time. Is the
Right.
impact on the person, even though it is their choice. I find it's interesting though because you talked about the pro-choice or pro-life and how in other countries it's not even painted that way. And I think you guys brought up some interesting points about like the laws regarding abortion in France or in Holland where it's not. Basically these two parties that stand in different ways where you said like what France it's like 14 or 16 weeks. I think that's very interesting because we
I gotta share it here. Yeah. So France, legal up to 14 weeks after conception or 16 weeks after the last menstrual period. So like,
right.
okay, a woman will find out probably after her last, so she'd got 4 weeks after her last period is roughly when she'll find out. So she'll have 12 weeks after that to decide, roughly.
Yeah, so
France.
it's not this right, and you think, oh, Europe is more progressive or they're more liberal or whatnot, but it's not necessarily that way because now we have a lot of states in the United States that have rules that go way beyond that. So um okay, wait a second.
I mean, look at that. Like people, I'm cracking up at these people on like Twitter and TikTok, be like, they're gonna take away our rights. I'm gonna move to Europe. Like we're Germany. 12 weeks. 12
Right.
weeks. Like they would say you're a far right crazy person if you say 12 weeks here. Right? Like now, special circumstances after 12 weeks or rape. Like France 14, Netherlands, what was it? Like 22 or something? I don't
Okay.
know.
24 weeks there.
Yeah. So 24, Spain 14. Okay. 24. Like, I don't know. Like, this is the type of like normal, like reasonable kind of conversation. I Googled this earlier because I saw it at one point somewhere and I wanted to bring up the stat, right? I do think like that is correct. And I don't know like the methodology for how like this was reported. But I do think like most women don't take abortions lightly, right? But I think there is a small portion of women that do use it like almost like birth control. It's a small portion of them, but like, and I've met some that have had like 4 or 5 abortions. That's just crazy, right? But Florida, this is 71% of Florida abortion reported as elective, 23% for social economic reasons. So like probably I can't afford a baby, I'm too young, that kind of thing. 3 were because of the mother's emotional, psychological health. Like psychological health, like I don't even know like what that means. Like I don't know, but we'll just assume that that's a viable reason. Like 71% were just like elective. I think that's kind of crazy. But again, I don't know if people would just say elective because they don't want to say their true reason. Yeah, here's the constitutional amendment in Michigan. Like, are you going to campaign on abortion rights in Michigan and like have that? I just find it so like ridiculous. I don't know, but whatever. Um,
Yeah, and I think this last election, abortion, unless you wanted basically to go back to Roe v. Wade, abortion was painted as more of an issue than it actually was because it is returned to the states. I mean, unless you're in a state where you're not happy with where it's at, then I could see that, but still.
Yeah. Well, they passed in Florida. There was a referendum for abortion and for weed legalization in this election.
Right.
And so like the people at the polls had an ability to vote and say whether or not they wanted to legalize recreational marijuana use. And I can't remember the details of the abortion one, but it's like reproductive rights and whatever. Florida voted against legalizing weed and against making abortion completely legal everywhere.
Hmm.
So like, I don't know, but I think there was like a 60% cutoff because of referendum or something. Or should referendum?
All right. They had to get like at least 60% of people for it or something like that.
Yeah, so amendment 4 results. Amendment 4. All right, so 99%. Amendment 1. Partisan school board members failed. 2. Right to hunt and fish passed. Recreational marijuana failed. Abortion access failed. This amendment would have made abortion legal until fetal viability, which is generally considered to be around 23 to 24 weeks. It would also allow abortions when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by a healthcare provider. The people voted. That was interesting. I think they needed 60%, and 57% of people voted yes.
Wow.
So, like, generally, people do agree with that. I feel like if maybe instead of 23 to 24 weeks, they would have brought it down to like 18, probably would have passed. And I said Florida, like Florida went to Trump by like 14 points. Like 60% of more conservative evening Americans are still in agreement with this. It's just interesting. But anyway, I think we're spending way too much time on an issue that, like, honestly, I think people care about way more than it's worth at this point because it'll be up to the states. Vote for your referendums if you get them, and then like vote for your state representatives, and that's that. I mean, like that's what America's supposed to be. It's like 50 different states that make their own rules, and the government should only be there to regulate defense and interstate commerce, and that's it. Other than
Right.
that, like stay the fuck out of our lives.
So, Mark, you were really for Robert F. Kennedy at one point, right? And you almost really introduced me to him. I was wondering if you could touch a little bit about why you were so pro Kennedy. And John Lake, I'm not even too sure where you fit in the mix, but I think you definitely became a supporter at some point as well. And I think you guys influenced me to the point where I think I still have my Kennedy sign out there.
Yeah, so I don't know how I originally started looking at him, but I'll put it this way: like I didn't vote for Trump like the first 2 elections. The first time when he won the primary, you can ask my wife, like when he won, like this was maybe the start of like my political like evolution, I guess, or change, I guess. When he won the primary, I was so angry. I was like yelling in the house, like screaming, like throwing stuff like outside because I was just so angry that like the guy's such an asshole, and I still think he's an asshole. He's a piece of shit, but he's our piece of shit, and he'll do things that'll help us. That's how I feel about it now. But I still don't think he's legitimately a good person. But I think he's gonna do things that are good. So it is what it is. But yeah, I was just extremely like angry. I didn't vote for him the second time either. And the big thing about that, I think the second time is obviously I didn't like Biden, but some of Biden's historical policies I think are okay. He used to be very much more of like that traditional, union pro-worker kind of Democrat. And I didn't like Trump. Big parts of like what I didn't like about what Trump did his foreign policy, I think he kicked ass. But he did blow up the debt like crazy. Now, obviously, COVID was a major part of that. Not the only part of that, though. The lockdowns also happened under him. I was okay with the lockdown for the first like 2 weeks. I didn't like it, but it wasn't fully like mandated. It was like I didn't feel like it was mandated. It just felt like, all right, well, we're gonna do this as a country. It's gonna slow things down. 2 weeks to slow the spread. It turns into 2 fucking years. Um, that little by little, like that got ridiculous. Like, right, they were shutting down parks, arresting people for like driving in their cars. Like there were people pulled over, like in Pennsylvania, that were just like, well, you're not supposed to be driving your car right now. Like, are you like an essential worker? Are you going to work? Can you prove that? And like, there was a point where like, I was locked down working from home for like so long that I'm just like, I'm going to go for a drive. And I just went for a drive for like an hour and a half. I'm like, just to get the hell out.
That's
I think,
right. My work did give me like paperwork so that I could say I was an essential worker, basically.
yeah.
So that like if I got pulled over or whatnot, I could explain it.
Yeah. I mean, you just think about how crazy that is, right? Like in the land of like freedom and opportunity, like, oh, you need paperwork to like leave your house and prove what for for like a disease that is 99.9% like fine, like if you get it, like you're not going to die if you get COVID, right? Like it's extremely rare. If you are going to die, it's because you're already sick in some sort of way or you're extremely old, right? Like or you have an autoimmune condition in some sort of way. So like that bothered me. Those are like some of the major things I don't like about Trump. And then the censorship also like happened after Trump, but there were some things that he did that were like somewhat pro censorship. So like at one point when they were having that like quote unquote summer of love and burning down all the cities everywhere, he like threatened like Facebook to go ahead and like shut down all these accounts of these people that are like planning these riots. I didn't like that, but like I feel like that's more acceptable than just like shutting down people because they're talking about like a vaccine or talking about a virus and trying to like figure out what the truth is. Because they're like planning an actual riot. Like we all saw, like the cities were burning everywhere. It wasn't peaceful protests or mostly people protests, but then all this like censorship of like I stopped using like Facebook. I got banned from like Twitter. Well, I got shut down twice and then I got permanently banned at one point. So now I have another Twitter account, which I'm currently suspended from also. But I can still view it. I just can't like and retweet anything. But like I didn't say anything this time. Like I was just like talking to this guy about like, oh, what kind of workouts should he do? And we're talking about like how many reps. And I'm like, well, don't do too much high weight if you haven't worked out. So go more reps. And I don't know how I got flagged, but whatever. But like that's the stuff that really pissed me off, right? It's like the lockdowns and the censorship shit. And that's really where like, and then the vaccine, right? And Trump oversaw the vaccine, bragging all the time of Operation Warp Speed. And Trump started that debt.
For me,
he oversaw the lockdowns.
There's some serious concerns also with the development of that, but
Mm-hmm. And like it might be relatively safe. I don't know, but like you should be able to question this, ask for the statistics, and not get banned or like shamed for like asking a completely reasonable question. If you have a disease that for 99.95% of people, it's completely fine. It's going to be like a mild flu. Your vaccine better be 99.9999999% safe. Otherwise, it's completely bonkers. If you have a vaccine that is safe for 99.5% of people and a disease that is safe for 99.95% of people, that vaccine is stupid and it's going to kill people more than it will save people. Right? Like, it's just crazy to even like have that, not be able to have that kind of discussion. Anyway, like Kennedy was like talking about that a lot. Right. And it took me, and I didn't want to forgive Trump for the lockdowns. He left it up to the states, so I kind of understand, but he oversaw it all and he let it go. He got duped by Fauci. He got duped by the big pharma. So I hated that. And then, Biden just made it worse when he came into office. Like he did everything to make inflation worse. The Inflation Reduction Act had nothing to do with helping inflation at all. It was actually a whole lot of government spending, which only
Yeah,
increases inflation.
to support certain political agendas, from what it seemed like to me.
Yeah, and like what I really like about Kennedy, when he talked about issues, he didn't do what like Trump and Kamala typically do, and that's like talk about like in a 20-second sentence, this is my policy, and that's it, right? He's able to like talk about his policy decision and about what he believes in detail, and he could talk about it for an hour and a half and say so much about like, well, this is why I believe this, and like here's the science behind it, and I've sued this company, and like this is how it turned out, and this is what's proved, and this is how the system works. If you want to pass this law, you have to do it this way. I'm not going to worry about this because it's just too divisive, and we shouldn't focus on these little issues that are going to divide our country. That he was just like the adult in the room there, and we need like politicians to be able to articulate the truth about why they believe something and not just do like 10-second sound bites and 30-second sound bites. And I think that's why Kamala, in my opinion, killed Trump in a debate, is because she was so well rehearsed with these sound bites. She could knock it out. But that's also why if she went to like something like Joe Rogan, she'd be great for 30 minutes. But if you put her in there for 3 hours to like talk and talk and talk, she's going to end up like looking like a retard. Like the emperor wears no clothes. You can't hide in a 3 hour long conversation. You're gonna have to be able to like discuss these details.
Yeah, she bombed a number of interviews that were friendly interviews, like on The View, talking about how Biden, she wouldn't change anything, and everybody's like, okay, you know.
I mean, yeah, I mean she had no policy, and the big part of why I supported Kennedy too is like I hate the two-party system. I think it's almost necessary because of the way the electoral college works and the rules there. But I just absolutely hate it, right?
Right.
And every time the Democrats end up cheating in the primary, they end up losing. So I was just pissed off that they were cheating again because I don't agree with most of Bernie's policies, but I like Bernie as a person. I think most of the time his heart's in the right place. And I think sometimes he just kind of gets swayed a little bit because he's hanging out with his like party people or whatever. But like, they stole the primary from Bernie. They got wrecked. They stole the primary from well, you could say Dean Williams, Williamson, and Kennedy because they didn't really let any of them compete, and they got wrecked again, right? And the Republicans are just as bad historically, but it seems like Trump is like taking him in a little bit different direction. Anyway, the reason I started supporting Trump is little by little, it seems like he was able to reconcile people and bring people on his team that normally wouldn't agree with being like most of the Republicans. And he was open-minded. And there are people that like I trust and seem to have a lot of ethics because they're willing to stand up against like people in charge around them and say things that are very inconvenient, like Kennedy, right? I know people always say he's crazy, but again, if you read the book like The Real Anthony Fauci, it'll scare the shit out of you. And if any of it was false, he would have been sued, right? Um, so, and then Tulsi, right? So I think if Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard both are willing to like get close to Trump and trust him, it shows to me that their judgment, I think I trust quite a bit. So
Yeah,
I think that's why I decided to support that. And then in the end, if Kennedy wasn't close and he would have stayed in the race, I might have ended up voting for Trump anyway. I'm not sure. I don't know what would have happened. Well, because the threat on censoring free speech is just too big. That's the biggest thing. Because at that point, right, if they shut down Twitter to a point where like you can't even have like conversations that are inconvenient, you won't even know what the truth is anymore. Because you won't be able to go online, search for something, do your own research, and figure out what the truth is. Like 99% of the shit that they send me in the mail about like Donald Trump's policies are like the opposite of what is actually true. Like you get something in the mail, and it's like voters education information, and it's like Donald Trump wants to kick out all Latinos. What?
Yeah, I think it's
Like
interesting that I received a number of those also, which were flat out just. It's like you were being lied to, blatantly.
Yeah, like Trump won 48% of the Latino vote in the United States, which is like unheard of for a Republican. 48%. That's insane, right? I mean, and it clearly he doesn't want to get rid of them. But I think Latinos are so pissed off about this illegal immigration because most of them that are voting went through, or them or their family went through the line, and they went through the process, which is not an easy process. And they got into the country, and they see all these people getting in like completely free, getting these debit cards, and getting flown to whatever like city they want, and they're like, "Fuck you," right? Like that would piss me off too.
I have new neighbors from the Dominican Republic, and they were very happy that Trump won.
Yeah. Did you talk to them about it at all?
Yeah, because they saw the signs I had out for Trump about the border, and I was basically saying, listen, it's not that I'm against immigration. I just want safe immigration.
Yeah.
I want there to be like a process where we can actually protect the people that are crossing and things like that. Not just this, wild west. So
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know how I feel about this whole like mass deportation thing though. So I think they should like make it 10 times or expand the amount of legal immigrants we bring into the US by at least 10 times what we currently allow. Because right now it's like a lottery process unless like you're really rich and you essentially buy one or invest in like a company. And we don't allow nearly enough people. But this whole like mass deportation, I don't think they'll be able to enforce it, or they will, to the point that they're talking about now, where they're gonna like deport 15 million people in 2 years. I just think like doing that is insane. But I do think like the first thing you need to do is stop the bleeding and fix the border. Like, because why?
right.
Like, if you can deport people and the border is still open, like you're just wasting time. But like fix the border and then deport anybody that has a criminal record, right? And then start like enforcing employment laws where they really have to like prove that they're legally in the country. And naturally, everybody will then leave slowly because they won't be able to work. Actually, they don't get any government benefits, and it'll happen. But I think if you do deport 15 million people in 2 years, all these people have jobs here, and I think that will cause an economic crash.
Right.
When you answer
Yeah,
the phone.
you did.
Maddox, Eliza, hi Eliza.
So they heard the noise and eventually figured out that was in the basement. And this is actually the first time they figured out, unless she left the basement door open. So.
Hi.
How's it going?
Hi. Hi. Hi.
There was
Hi.
there was a point that I was going to mention that we kind of skipped over when we were talking about COVID, and how, to me, it's what makes me more interested in politics. Knowing that just how messed up the United States became, and how just pushing the vaccine and all of that. And there was this agenda that was saying that, COVID was so dangerous. And so if you look at like the massive flus in history, it's like, there was 1 out of every 8 people that died from the black flu, from the Spanish flu. There's, they were pulling dead people off the streets then. And if you look at our population growth, during the pandemic was our fastest growing population in the United States. We were making more babies. We were really growing, and we have this data is pretty interesting here. You can see it's just like a fairly steady line here, and then all of a sudden pandemic happens, and then boom, there's a spike in population.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And then after that, and then the population starts climbing very slowly. So you could almost see that like the population growth was like averaging like 0.5, 0.7% here. And now it's much lower. Now it's at 0.2 or even 0.4. And there was a huge, like, it just grew almost twice as much during the year of the pandemic. And so it's interesting finding, you can find that on usafacts.org, to think about well, really, what was the truth of what we experienced then?
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting because like what do they put the official death toll at in the United States now? Like something over 1 million or something like that. Over the vaccine over like the years. Um, I think at one point it was like 500,000, but I don't remember. I haven't looked at it recently because I don't still believe any of the numbers anymore. Because the hospitals were going to get more money if they were going to tag like, somebody died from COVID. So really, they would say like they died from COVID when they just died with COVID. And then like somehow like the flu like nearly completely disappeared. So like how much of that is really like you died from the flu and not COVID? I really don't know. It's like hard to trust anything when there's like incentives for them to lie. But it's like I don't know. There's stuff out there too, and I'll have to like find so like I wonder if like this is gonna sound very conspiracy theory-ish, but like I think it's worth like looking into at some point. But when they were testing the vaccine on like a small group of people originally before they completely rolled it out, any man that was gonna be a part of it, they were told not to have sex within like X amount of weeks with a woman without using at least 2 forms of birth control because they were afraid of what it would potentially do. And the reason for why that isn't available anywhere. Right. And some people didn't do it, but like the results are also not like publicly searchable of like these studies. And it's just I'd like to learn more about that. Like why is that shit kept private from people? Like show us all the studies, show us the details of them completely. Right? Like all of it. Like there's stuff out there now, like I'm just Googling it, but I don't know. Like the fact that Bill Gates was like on it and he's like very much, human population growth is dangerous. It almost like leads me to think like, well, maybe he's like engineering something to try to like reduce like birth rates. I don't know. But probably a topic for a different day to like dig into a little bit, maybe do a little bit of research ahead of time. Instead of just like random shit I heard on the internet kind of thing. You know, I question everything. I don't really believe much of anything that's posted until I can verify it myself. But I'm gonna put it into like a little corner somewhere of like, oh, I want to look into this.
It looks like Matt's gonna head out.
Yeah, well, we're an hour in, so like,
Yeah, sorry. They were messing with my paint rollers, and Maddox already busted one. You can see.
yeah, kids are
Eliza,
having
go.
fun.
Hey.
So I want to maybe do this again one time and see maybe we can like have a guest.
Sure.
I don't know. Think about like somebody that like knows more about something or has like a unique perspective. Like
Yeah.
one thing I would love to like do at some point, and maybe this is like maybe more
Hey,
like
get
long
out of
term.
there.
I would love to have somebody on that has transitioned or wants to transition or is in the process of transitioning or something like that. Man or woman versus man. And it just would be like have like a true like respectful conversation and like try to like because I don't know many people like that. I've met some, but like I don't feel comfortable like asking them like all these questions like when I meet them and like know them. But like if you guys know somebody that maybe would be interested in having that type of conversation and keep it respectful, I think that'd be cool. Just to like get their perspective on things because most of like even like any like gay lesbian friends that I have, like they're completely against like transitioning kids. Like I just think that's crazy. So I'd just be curious to see if I could talk to somebody that truly has that view and see if I can understand it better because I just can't. Right.
And I think that definitely was a losing point with the election is not even because the platform that Kamala might have had at one point, but some of the things she was running for or espoused when she was against Biden, some of the things other people had said, I think definitely turned some people off. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, just these like crazy like woke issues that like affect 0.1% of the population and maybe a positive way if you truly believe their shit. But like scare like 70, 80% plus of the population. Like don't know, like how many people does it actually affect that trans men or whatever you call them? I always get confused. A trans man, like somebody that was a man is a woman, or a woman and a man. I don't know. The whole thing kind of confuses me a bit. But like, people that were men transitioning to a woman are allowed in like girls' locker rooms and girls' sports. That's like maybe 1% of the population, and it might affect like 20% of the population or something. It's not an issue that everybody should like care so much about, in the sense of it's not going to affect you to a point of like, well, just 15% unemployment, like, or like you don't have free speech anymore, or you're locked down in your house for like 2 years now and you can't leave. But it's just so crazy to make that like one of your top like policy things. It's just, I don't get it.
Right.
Anyway, we'll have to come up with a name for this if we do it. I don't know. I think I'll download the recording, and I think I'll just upload it to YouTube just as is.
Yeah.
Be like episode
Sounds
1, fireside chats with the Laubes or something.
Lob fireside chats. I like that.
Fair enough.
Well, it's good to see you guys, and
Oh, prediction for the Eagles game?
well, my hope is that they're gonna crush them by at least 40 points. But my prediction is they are gonna win by like 13, 14 points. That's it.
With the Cowboys.
Yeah, they play the Cowboys. Dak Prescott's out, so like it should in theory be a blowout because the Cowboys have been bad this year and they're missing their quarterback. My prediction is going to be 34-17 Eagles. So like a big win, but I bet the Eagles for the first time this year are going to start hot, go up 10-0 in the first quarter, and then the Cowboys are going to like tie it up, make it close, maybe even go ahead, and then the Eagles will blow them out for the rest of the game afterwards.
Nice.
Don't like any predictions, or you just don't care?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, I just ate fish tacos and what's gonna be for dinner, and those are the things that's on my mind. I'm gonna go to the gym, and yeah, just let me know how the game goes.
All right, sounds good.
All
Well,
right,
peace out. I'll load it. Well, I'm gonna have to download it first. I'll let you know when it's loaded. It might not even be today, but I'll try.
sounds good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good
Alright,
to see you
peace.
guys.
Cheers. Bye.